is a national treasure and the GOAT, the greatest of all time, topiary yards. I tell you, nobody was doing what Pearl was doing. He said, he's looking at my pictures and he says, wow, you know what? I've never met another person that was doing anything similar to what I was doing. Yeah. He's like, I see topiary all over the world, but I've never seen somebody doing anything close to what I'm doing. What you're doing is very unique. Keep doing it. So I'm like, I got the stamp of approval.
And welcome to another episode of the Bandit Room. My name is Charles, joined here in the studio today by Mr. Caleb.
Hello again.
How's it going?
Good. Yeah.
What you been up to, Caleb?
I've been watching The Bear.
Okay,
show.
The Bear. Gotcha.
Very good.
You getting caught up, or you just started?
I just started, but I'm almost caught up already. So
it's such a great series.
It's so good.
It's good. You enjoying that?
Oh yeah, I watched it. Yeah.
I heard they just released the trailer for the third one. Right?
Yeah. It comes out later this month, so I'm excited for season 3 because Have you finished season 2? Oh, okay. So
ends on a cliffhanger though.
Well, it ends on a great cliffhanger. So
okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
It's a great progression. Are you just on season 1?
I'm just starting season 2.
Oh, okay.
So just getting into it like that part. So.
Oh man, so it's getting exciting now.
It's so good. It's crazy. I'm really impressed.
Great acting, great writing. Yeah,
that's true.
It's really good.
It's crazy. Yeah.
I remember when we had one of our earlier episodes, we were talking to a chef, Chris Coleman, about it, and he was like, I think it's too stressful. It's too stressful to watch.
It's too real. It's too real is what he said.
It's too much like going to work when he watches that show, because he was like, this brings back all these horrible memories.
Oh my. But, I can't even imagine, but the show gives a great insight on what it looks like to work in a kitchen setting, I guess.
Yeah. But before we get into all that, let's introduce our guest. You've heard him a little bit already. Our guest today is Mr. Mike Gibson. Thank you for joining us today, Mike.
Thank you so much for having me. It's quite the pleasure.
Thank you. Now, Mike, you are a property artist, a term that you've sort of coined there. You're the founder of Gibson Works Property Art. You've served as the artist in residence at the Pearl Fryar Topiary Garden, created over 600 topiary designs, and you've been a featured contestant on HGTV's Clipped, featuring Martha Stewart. That's quite a few things that you've been up to there.
Yeah. There may be a couple of things missing there, but
okay.
Okay.
I'm just giving a brief introduction.
No. Yeah,
just a brief introduction. Just a few.
It's been quite a
points.
journey. It's been quite a journey. Great career so far. Thus far, I'm 37 years young, and it's been pretty fun.
Fantastic. Now, what drew you? Now, you primarily work in the field of what you would refer to as topiary. What drew you into that?
Oh man, that's a great story. Actually, I give credit to my father. So he's an artist. He's a pastelist, and now he's more into digital art now. But he's an award-winning artist. It was pretty awesome to see him creating this works of art from blank canvases and then taking it to a museum and winning. So that was pretty cool. So he already had these geometrical shaped shrubs around the yard. So by 7, leading up to that, I always say I started at 7, but it started before then, right? So because I was trying to emulate my father, I was always just behind him as his shadow and watching him, how he trimmed the bushes, and I was just fascinated how perfectly round he can get them. It was like these perfect globes sitting in our yard and pure medial shapes, and the edges were so fine. So it was something that I fascinated about, and by 7, I took over the helm of maintaining those beautiful structures that he had already, these sculptures that he had. And I would say this hated chore, turned into a passion of mine, of working in the yard. So after, trial and error and years of just clipping and maintaining these hedges, it moved into the neighborhood, by neighbors, and eventually across town. And,
just like saying, hey, can I trim these up for you? Or that kind of thing?
I was that kid with the lawnmower and the hedges, and a pair of shears.
Was it an entrepreneurial effort, or was it more of a creative
it was entrepreneur early on. It was like,
it's like, I can get some money.
I can get some extra. Cut a grass for $10. It was like, oh, this is great. Got some money, right? But by 10, I was already cutting hair as well. So my mom's a licensed beautician. And we had a shop in our basement. So full of talent in the house. My sisters
scissors wherever you go. You had
exactly. See, you're getting it. Now you're understanding the scissor hands, right? So I'm watching my mom. I would go in the shop. We had a shop in our basement. And these clients were pointing out hairstyles in the magazine. And like, I want this one. My mom's like, oh, sit down. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah. And a couple hours later, she does it even better than what is in the picture. It's like, wow, how do you? There's no instructions. How do you know how to do this? She's like, oh, I just see it. That was my upbringing. So that years later, I stayed with that. I started cutting hair by 10. So I'm cutting hair, I'm cutting grass, I'm cutting my sister's dolls, I'm cutting anything I can get my hands on. I used to juggle with scissors, crazy things.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness.
When you refer to cutting your dad's bushes there, do you think he would have considered what he was doing to be topiary work, or he just thought I'm just keeping my hedges nice?
He's just keeping the hedges nice. Yeah. So we grew up, I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, and grew up in a very rough neighborhood. And we were one of the few that kept up on our yard. And my father had this perception of, similar to what Pearl had, and we'll get to that later on, but about, this perception of keeping up the yard in the neighborhood, making it look nice, and that deters violence, and it shows others in the neighborhood that we're actually going to upkeep our yard. But we were that family. We were that family to make sure no matter what, the least thing we can do in our neighborhood to help make the neighborhood look nice and the community look nice was upkeep our yard. And we took pride in that. After we did it as a family. So after we were done, we would stand at the end of the driveway and look at our work. Similar to how my mom would stand back after she finished the hairstyle. My dad would stand back after he finished the piece and was like, it's done. I can sign it now. That's it. Okay. But it wasn't until years later until I understood what topiary was. I fell in love with the Edward Scissorhand movie and didn't even know that was topiary. Right? I didn't understand the term of what it was. So when you said in the beginning you introduced me as a property artist, that's why I called myself a property artist. I went to school for fine art at Youngstown State University. I was always going to be an artist. By 10, I was in art competitions. I wanted to follow in my father's footsteps. I was every medium you can think of. I was dabbling in, just trying to see what was going to be my medium. My father fell on to pastels, but I would say none of those were my passion. I didn't find the passion there like I did with working in nature, right? But it wasn't until years later where I started doing more intricate hairstyles, and that translated into the yard, because then I started cutting hair and doing these designs.
Cutting into designs.
Like a topiary, right? Like a topiary. But you know what it was? I had a cousin that played basketball in Columbus. Shout out to Aaron. And he was the one that kind of got me on this path of sketching out designs. It was like he knew I was an artist. He's like, what can you come up with? I don't want just a regular, part in my head. I don't want a Jordan symbol. Everybody can do that. Sure. Do something really creative. I'm a basketball player. I got a game coming up. I want to show out. So what do you like? Oh, what are you wearing? I see you're wearing Adidas shoes. You got all Adidas gear on. So and your number's 35. Perfect. And your basketball. So I put the Adidas symbol, the leaf, a big leaf in the back of his head that had a basketball in it with the number 35 inside of that as well. Yeah, and I would say that was the game changer when I started I sketched that out, and exactly what I had on paper was in his head, right? So it was like, okay,
fantastic.
I'm on to something. Well, if I can envision, like my parents, if I can envision this, and see it on paper and put it and put that immediately in somebody's head, what can I do to a bush? I started looking at bushes totally differently, and that's when property art was born. From there, it just kind of blew up.
Gotcha. And what point in your life was this? You're talking how old were you?
This was this was around like 2010 era. I would say things started changing a little bit differently. Gotcha. Yeah, about 2010, I started doing more abstract pieces and breaking away. I mean, there's an art form in classical topiary and doing geometrical shapes. And for those that are listening, the topiary, by definition, is the art of trimming trees and shrubs into any shape. Doesn't matter what it is, right? But typically it's some type of classical shape, geometrical shape, at least has some type of geometricalness to it. When you look at topiary and you Google topiary, immediately you're going to see, things in England and all over the UK and all over the world. You're going to see more like perfect balls and pyramidal shapes and pom-poms, things that in spirals. You'll see that but it's very symmetrical, right? Yeah. And I wanted to break away from that. When somebody first called my work a topiary, was I was working on this piece. It's very intricate piece. I'm cutting into it. I'm exposing the branches, and a neighbor was walking up the street. They're walking their dog, and they walk up the driveway. And it was like, what are you doing here? This is an interesting topiary. And it was like, oh, this is a property art, I'm creating. And she's like, what's that? No, you're creating topiary. Topiary. So I went home. And I'm like, what? Topiary. I mean, I've heard this name. Disney World. You think of, and
Sure.
It wasn't something I saw growing up.
You
didn't see topiary in the hood at all. I'm sorry. It just wasn't a thing. But I guess if you, by definition, we had topiary. We had these geometrical shapes. And that started a little different journey. I went down the rabbit hole and started learning more about topiary and the art. And then I became a student after that. I was like, oh, well, this is pretty cool.
What would you say the difference is between topiary work and property art? So what you're doing, would you say it's like you're enhancing an entire property instead of just like a single bush?
So exactly. So I am focused on the entire aesthetic of the property. I am creating a canvas. Your property is my canvas, right? So I'm working on the balance and the rhythm of the entire landscape. Typically when somebody's just thinking of just doing topiary, they're maybe just thinking of topiarying that one tree, of creating some type of sculpture out of that. And typically, topiary started young. You don't see, I'm like this anomaly. You don't see people creating topiary out of existing trees and shrubs. Things that have been there for years, and that's my forte. I want a tree that's been there for 20 plus years that's just overdeveloped because they have the branch structure is different.
Well, your approach to it would have to be incredibly different depending on the type of situation too, right? Because like if it's a tree that's been treated like a topiary, you're trimming it up regularly, it's going to have a very like dense understructure, right?
Correct.
But if it's a tree that's sort of let go for years, it's going to have a very you're a little bit more limited in what you can do with it, or would you say
like necessarily because it depends on the tree. So an older tree is actually depending on the species. So let's say if we're talking about we're in South Carolina, so you see a lot of Ilex vomitoria, which is Yopon hollies. You see those everywhere. And people are mistaken for boxwoods. They're not boxwoods. They're Yopon hollies. Just they're better. They're 10 times better than the boxwood, but they grow so dense. And you can let that grow for years, and it just gets so compact. Those branches inside are just continually growing. So, but if you have a tree, say like if you're thinking like a pine tree, or a spruce tree, some type of spruce, typically as they get bigger, their branches are growing more out, right? So like some junipers, they start off more compact, but as they get larger, those branches are starting to spread more, right? So, am I limited to the design? No, I'm not trying to make Mickey Mouse with it, right? I guess that would be limited if the client would say, hey, can you make Mickey Mouse with it? You're like, I don't see it. It's not going to happen. This tree is not going to yield the possibilities for that. But every tree gives me an opportunity to do something new because of that.
It seems to me that the way you see your work is that there's something inside an individual plant that you can bring out of it. It's not it's sort of a combined effort. It's not just like I see this, I'm going to make it this. Like what if that that tree or shrub doesn't have the bones to make that happen? Like if you just had a random design that you want to assign to it.
So I examine the tree. So if you're thinking of like my approach, what am I doing? I'm looking at the structure. I'm opening it up. I'm seeing the flow of the branches and what's possible. How dense is it? What can I do with this? What's the possibility? And then the tree kind of tells you what it wants to be. It's like, oh, I can't be Mickey Mouse, but I can be something better.
Be something fantastic.
I can be something fantastic. So I see beauty in every tree. When I look at a tree, I immediately start designing it.
Yeah.
And I can't turn it off. It's a gift and a curse. You're driving, you're like, oh wait, you gotta hurry up and turn. But
I imagine so.
Yeah,
but that only comes with working on 1,000 plants. I mean, like you've got to be gotta have that history.
But I feel that I was born with it. It's a God-given gift. I tell people it's like the universe is flowing through me, right? This talent, I'm just a vessel.
I love that you refer to it as an art because it really is. And it's just like sculpture, really. I mean, you're creating sculpture. It's just a different medium. You're not working in marble or bronze or clay or whatever. You're working in, live organisms.
Yeah.
But it reminded me because Michelangelo had this thought that when he would look at a block of stone, you've probably heard of this, but he was just chiseling away at what was supposed to be removed.
Yeah, it's already there.
Yeah, the sculpture was already inside it, and apparently, like the same, according to this theory, you couldn't just carve any design you wanted into a piece of stone. He had to find what was meant to be in it. So.
Yeah. David was already there.
Right.
It was already inside the marble.
Yeah.
He just dusting away and chiseling away so that everybody else can see it.
Right.
And that's what I do. When I solve the puzzle in my mind, and now I got to bring it out, and it takes time. I got to keep clipping. Everybody's, immediately when you see the work starting, you're like, what is this?
Where's this going?
Yeah. What could this be? Because it's something that you can't relate to.
Yeah.
You can't look at when you look at a spiral and you see a spiral starting, immediately that's going to be a spiral, right? You can reference because you know what a spiral looks like. But when you see something that's designed as the galaxy, say for instance, I'm referencing a piece I did in Lake City for Art Fields.
Okay.
And there was a Yopon holly hedge, and I dedicated to Dr. Ronald E. McNair, who was a part of the Challenger crew that blew up in '86. Wow. Unfortunately, he was born in Lake City, and there's a memorial there where this is, and I just was fascinated by his story. Yeah. So being connected there, and I saw this hedge, it's like, I gotta tell a story related to him, so that it fits into this space, right, and that's part of it, of creating the property art. It has to fit space. It has to fit into that space. It has to make sense. I couldn't put Mickey Mouse there. I can't put elephants there. It just wouldn't worked out. You know,
like I've got this design I've really been wanting to do, so I'm just going to do it on the next thing.
Exactly. I can't force it.
Right.
But in looking at that and in the space, it told me what it wanted to be.
Yeah.
I sat there for at least an hour staring at this and trying to come up with a concept.
So talk about that. Yeah. So so and so asks you to come out and say, hey.
More
ask
Farms Botanic Garden hired me to create a sculpture for Art Fields.
Was it for that specific piece or
for that specific space? Yes. We drove around town, was looking for a specimen, a tree that I can sculpt.
Yeah.
By the public library, there's this overgrown hedge. We managed the lawn there, but this hedge we never cut. And you said you like Yopon holly, so see what you can do with it. And immediately it was like,
so you're like, I can do something with it, but I don't know what it is yet.
Exactly. I knew I was going to do something, and it was going to be fantastic. It's just I didn't know, and of course the wheels were turning. It took some months to come up with an idea, because this was proposition last year. I had some time to think about it, but it didn't really come to life until hours before I was going to do it.
Gotcha. That's wild.
Right, yeah.
So I've spoken to a lot of muralists and things like that before too. So that, when somebody hires them for a job, they've submitted designs already for it. It's like they're going into it knowing exactly what's going to go on a particular wall.
Right.
But you're saying, like with you're like, I'll do it, but I don't know what it is until I actually get going.
You got to trust me. I have a lot of evidence that I'm pretty good at what I'm doing. So please just trust me.
Yeah.
And I give people a general idea of what it can be. It's like, hey, I can do something with your tree. Hire me and watch the magic happen. Here's my resume. Here's my portfolio of 600 topiaries I've created. Yeah. It's gonna look great regardless. So it took some time, but a few hours before I started, the name came to me, Otherworldly. Okay. Otherworldly came to me, like, you're gonna do something out of this world, otherworldly. Okay, now I got a concept. Now I got to do something.
It's literally made of the earth.
It's made of the earth, right? So the concept here is, he passed away on the Challenger, and this was his second time in space, but it didn't get a chance to enter orbit, actually.
Yeah.
So the idea was to, create something that was a continuation of his life.
Yeah.
I imagine, well, what happened to his soul? What if his spirit is roaming free throughout the chaos and the cosmos and the galaxies, and he's, visiting all these different places that we would never dream of.
Right.
He's seeing all these different nebulas and gaseous clouds, and and that gave me the idea. Well, I'm going to create something from his perspective.
Yeah.
His view throughout the cosmos.
Gotcha.
If you go to like NASA's website, right, and you see the pictures of like nebula, gaseous clouds, and you're like, whoa, what is that? Two spinning galaxies clashing into each other. It's like, we can't fathom this.
Right.
I wanted to create something from his perspective, and he sees this cool, formation growing, and that's called otherworldly. So.
Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. Do you have particular shrubs or trees that you prefer to work on? Do you have a favorite necessarily?
Well,
is it hard to have a favorite?
I've been mentioning it a lot.
Yeah.
So Yopon holly is my favorite now, since I've been living in South Carolina, because we didn't have Yopon hollies in Ohio. Just the zones, the growing zone is different. It's a little colder climate up there, and they don't typically like colder climate.
Right.
But typically, any evergreen can be topiary.
Gotcha.
It doesn't matter the tree, really, even deciduous trees. It doesn't matter what it is. If I see a sculpture in it, I can do something with it.
All right.
Yeah. There's some hornbeams that I have at this property that they're like these cubes, these rectangle prisms that have been creating, and then they're going to lose all their leaves, in the fall, and then it grows back, and you got to try to
chop it up,
maintain it. So the idea is every time it loses its leaves, you hard prune the branches to stay in that shape,
Gotcha.
right? And then once they flesh out, late spring, give the foliage a cut down. Let it grow a little bit more, fill out the areas it needs to be, because you gotta see the imaginary lines. It's not quite where it needs to be, and that's something that needs to be understood with topiary. It's the initial cut is not the final cut. Yes, the tree's been growing for years, and it's fuller than starting something from scratch from a 5-gallon pot that's only 2 feet tall or something, right? But it's going to take time and develop and fill in, because it's the first time it's been pruned this way. But any tree, it doesn't matter.
Is something you wouldn't work with?
Something I wouldn't.
Is there a tree you wouldn't work with? Is there a tree you would never work with?
You know what?
The Bradford pears get a lot of hate. I don't know.
I could probably do something with those Bradford pears.
You could.
They grow in such a nice shape.
You probably could, actually, because they're like perfect circles.
Yeah, they grow in a nice shape, and you could, the branch structure is really unique. You could do something really cool with it, but it may not. The smell of it and the pollen. Sorry, Bradford pears. They had their time. They were.
Oh, they had a heck of a run.
They did, yeah. They were cheap landscape trees, and everybody used them everywhere. But a tree that I wouldn't work with, I tried to stay away from deciduous trees because of the fact that they're going to lose their leaves.
Yeah.
The style that I'm doing, I need it to stay green all year long, so that you can really appreciate it, and that it constantly keeps filling in. And the climate we have, trees are growing all year long. They go.
Is there a favorite topiary garden, or is there sort of like what would you consider to be like the ideal place for a topiary that you'd love to do some work at?
That I love to do some work at. Oh man,
well, I don't know. Either what you'd love to visit, or that you'd love to have something in.
Yeah, because some of these gardens, they're not.
They're specific.
They're not
established.
Installing new topiary. So like Levens Hall. Levens Hall is in Cumbria, England.
Okay.
It is the oldest topiary garden in the world.
Gotcha.
Over 300 plus years of topiary there, and that's just been maintained the same way all these years long.
Wow.
But I would say that's on my bucket list to see.
Yeah.
That's quite a spectacle to see something that's been growing for 300 years.
Yeah. That's
cool. Yeah.
Now let's talk about the different styles around the world. So you mentioned the English style. That's sort of one of the typical styles you think about when you think of topiary. But like all over the world, they have different types of topiary, right? And like the Japanese, they have the Zen garden kind of thing, right? Where
Yes.
particularly groomed.
Nawake is a style of what we would call topiary. You know, it is trying to make that tree as balanced as possible, so it can live a fruitful life. Gotcha. So they're taking away branches, they're pom-pomming. They're pom-pom is when you remove so much of the branch where it kind of looks like clouds. But all over the world, I'm thinking of pollard ring. When you pollard a tree, you prune it out. They do this a lot to deciduous trees. They prune it all the way back, and here we see it often. And it's the term called crepe murder, right? When you
like chop them off,
you chop it all the way back, and now you have these knuckles.
Yeah.
So that's essentially a style of topiary, actually. I mean, you see this all over the place where you have they'll constantly keep pruning it, though. You don't want any leaves on it. You just want to have the more the blistering knuckles, the better. So there's a lot of different styles. I mean, typically in topiary is pretty consistent around the world. You know, when you think of the type of styles, those classical topiary is seen everywhere. I wouldn't say there's like a real standout. The biggest difference is the abstract style. You know, that's what stands out. Gotcha. You know, how much of a way can you pull yourself from the classical term? You know, and make something new. You know, those are the topiaries that stand out. Yeah, the nice shapes, and you know, I love the freedom of shrubs. You know, and what it does. So there's not too many artists that are doing free form topiary and abstract topiary. I mean, you got guys like Pearl Fryar who revolutionized the game. When you talk about doing like abstract and freeformness, and I guess I'm continuing that. So you know.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. So what brought you to South Carolina?
Well, the gentleman I just mentioned, Pearl Fryar, is a national treasure here in South Carolina. And what we consider in the industry, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, topiary artists. I mean, you got some really great topiary artists throughout history. But I tell you, nobody was doing what Pearl was doing. You know, and still to date, you just don't see anything like it.
And for those who aren't familiar, could you do a little background on like Pearl's story, just like a quick little version of it?
I'll try to make this quick. I tell the story so much. So you got to go all the way back to when Pearl was stationed in the Army and had the opportunity of seeing some bonsais created while he was stationed overseas. And I'm gonna there's so much in between here. I mean, Pearl was protesting throughout riots throughout the 60s. You know, I mean, he's done so much in the civil rights era. He was doing so much throughout his career. Because this man is brilliant, and what he created is just phenomenal, and will go down in history. Moves down to Bishopville, South Carolina, wants to buy a house, has some money. Him and his wife are looking at this beautiful house, and immediately he gets denied. And they said, you know, why? You know, I got the money for it. I can buy this house. You know, I just need some, loan amount. And they're like, no, we don't want you in this neighborhood because we feel that black people don't upkeep their yards. And it's like, here's that stigma. Yeah, this horrible stigma. And he's like, all right, you know what? Forget it. I don't want this house anymore. He went up the street, ends up buying a plot of land. There used to be a cotton field, right? So it's like there's all these this history built into this. Builds a house, builds this nice, beautiful brick ranch house. So it's like, and he's like, immediately, I'm hiring landscapers. I'm planting trees all around. So he planted like privacy fence around the yard. Those were some of the first trees planted. The very first thing he did was create a roundabout driveway by hand, by himself, on his hands and knees, in a wheelbarrow, mixing cement, and it's like a mosaic pattern that he created with the stone and glass and bricks, and that was probably the beginning of what was to come. Right? That this man is different, and he's going to do something different because he wanted to show everybody that he can upkeep his yard. So he had some little bonsais he was still working on, and wasn't getting into like the intricate trimming of it yet. because in Pearl's mind, bonsais are kept small, right? That's how he learned. You keep a bonsai small. Well, he goes to a local nursery to buy some more trees. This is when everything gets clicked. This is when it all happens. This is the birth of Pearl Fryar, the topiary genius. He sees a man doing a topiary. He's cutting a topiary, and that's when he puts two and two together. It's a larger topiary at this nursery. And he's like, what are you doing? This is called topiary. What's this? I thought it was a bonsai. He's like, no, bonsai is small. He said, well, I didn't know you can do that to a larger tree.
Yeah.
I didn't know you can bonsai a larger tree.
Yes.
He's like, well, I can do that. Yeah. So the guy kind of gives him a 3-minute lesson.
Yeah.
And that's what started it all.
Yeah.
He goes back home and just starts trimming everything. He starts with this holly on either side of the steps, and then goes to the boxwood. The holly was kept nice. It's an interesting shape because it isn't cut into, and you can tell how his style changed and evolved from there. Just by walking around the house. Because you see the first tree, and it's still there today. There's on either side of the steps is these holly trees, and they're kind of like these, more like a triangle of shape. They have large size and a flat face, but they're kept kind of like in this triangle. But it's smooth to how his technique is, and he creates these bevel edges by similar like brushing hair. You go only going up and then drag it across, and what it does is it creates this nice fine, like almost like a part, but it creates a nice fine line because of that. And then he goes to the boxwoods, and then the hollies, and then the junipers, and then and before you know it, he caught the bug and is creating this beautiful topiary garden. Now it isn't birthed into a topiary garden yet. It's just, I just want to upkeep my yard.
Yeah.
I just want to make my yard nice. Yeah. Him and his wife are driving around town. They see a sign in the yard that says Yard of the Month.
Yeah.
Now it's a competition. They messed up now. You mean to tell me they're giving an award for the Yard of the Month? And I can show everybody that I know how to upkeep my yard. Right. When you think of topiary gardens, you're going to say Levens Hall. You're going to say Versailles, which has some topiary. It's classical.
Sure.
You're going to say Ladue Topiary Garden in Maryland.
Okay.
You're going to think of Green Animals, which is the Green Animals Topiary Garden in Portsmouth, Rhode Island. It's the oldest topiary garden in the country. But out of those, the next one you're going to think of is Pearl Fryar. If you're talking like top 5, Pearl Fryar is in there. If he's not number 2. So he goes back home and gets to working on this garden even more, wants to enhance it even more, right? And he applies for it. He gets denied. And they say, well, remember you moved a couple of streets up? That's not quite considered Bishopville anymore. What? And he's like, what are you talking about? It's clearly, like, I can see the sign that says welcome to Bishopville. It's like right there. And they're like, yeah, but, you're over there and we're over here. Oh, yeah, it was a zoning thing. Eventually, of course, they absorbed it, right? Of course, right? Yeah. They're like, oh, this street has always been Bishopville. What do you mean? Welcome, Pearl. Yeah, you get to Q the city. Yeah, no. But it took a while. And he applies again, and he said, you know what? I'm not applying anymore because I'm going to do something so creative, so unique. I'm going to force your hand. They're like, yeah, no, that's not happening. Not only have we never given it to anybody outside of the city, we've never given it to a black man. Yeah. So there's no way you're going to win this. Yeah. He's like, all right, I'll show you. Yeah. So he gets more plants. And this is pretty unique to Pearl's story, too. Yeah. He wasn't just purchasing plants. Yeah. Eventually, he said he made enough money to support his passion, where he was able to buy the right trees he wanted and create more in the garden. But early on, he was getting them out of the recycle bin, the trash out of these nurseries. They had a trash pile where it's like deemed unsellable. Yeah. And it's like, oh, we can't sell these. It's got a little brown on it. Chuck it. Oh, it's got a disease. Chuck it. Yeah. And they chucked it in the back, and Pearl be pillaging through and say, oh, look at this juniper. I could do something with this. Eventually, it turns into thousands of trees in his yard, and at least like 40% of that is recycled trees. Wow. Yeah, because eventually he started making really good money at the Cannon plant and the Coca-Cola plant down there, and was like, all right, I want to get that $200 tree. Give me that tree. Give me 5 of those. 4.5 years from the initial start of wanting to be this Yard of the Month, word gets around town. Everybody wants to see this garden. It's starting to become a staple in not just the city, but the Tri-County and the state at that, because people are starting to come from far. People coming from Columbia wanting to see this. The word got around to the right person, the person that was making the judgment from the garden club. Gets to them. They get a chance to come out there. They see the garden. They take some pictures. Come back, a couple of days later, and they're hemming a sign in the yard that says Yard of the Month. He eventually wins in 1985. He wins the Yard of the Month. That is the start, the beginning. That's Pearl Fryar's origin story. Yeah. Because from there it didn't stop. Yeah. Because once you got this momentum, you gotta continue. Yeah. Right. So he keeps getting more trees. He bought the lot next to him, and the lot behind him. Now you have 3.5 acres of land, almost 4 acres of land, and he just kept planting and trimming. He's working 10-hour shifts, 10, 12-hour shifts at this canning plant, getting home and continuing to work in the garden to 2 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. He has flood lamps buried, these electrical lines buried throughout the garden. He's plugging in lamps, he was using the high beams from the truck, his car. He had a couple cars, so he would just angle them where he was working, and he would keep working out throughout the night. Fast forward to 2006 is when a crew got together and created a award-winning documentary called A Man Named Pearl. Yeah. And that was like, now the world knows about it. Right. Oprah shows the documentary on her show and comes to meet him. Martha Stewart shoots an episode in the garden. He's on every magazine you can think of about garden, Southern Living, everything, Better Homes. HGTV wants to come do episodes. Yeah. Everybody in the country, and then the world knows about him now. So people are coming from Japan, China. People are coming from all over. He said it was like an amusement park. At any given day, you can have 6 people here. You can have 400 people here. Yeah. Right? 400 people. And this is a residential area, I'll remind you. Yeah. This is not a garden that's established park somewhere that has all kind of land. This is in a residential neighborhood that's a cul-de-sac, so it's a dead-end street, right? So they had to create a roundabout because of how many tour buses were coming down the street couldn't turn around. They had to back all the way back down the driveway or back down the street to turn around. So the city, caught on. Now they absorbed the street. Now it's a part of the city limits now. And that is how Pearl became the most famous American topiary artist, the most famous topiary artist in the world, to date, all because of one statement that said he couldn't upkeep his yard. Right. I believe, if not mistaken, he has a Guinness World Record for the most topiary in a residential neighborhood. Wow. Yeah, because it's so much. Listen to this. He gives out this scholarship to students at the 2 local high schools they have there in Bishopville, and it's so powerful what he does. You would think when you think of scholarships, you're like, oh, you got to have 4.0 straight A's. No, not for Pearl Fryar scholarship. He's giving it out to the C students, the students that are still trying to achieve but just may not have the right resources as those other children, or you still want to go to school, but you got to see average. Some of these colleges aren't taking chances on you. It's hard to get in. You're not getting money for it. So he's giving money to those kids that still want to pursue a higher education, but may not have the right opportunities. And that talks about his message of not giving up on something. Like, he didn't give up on those trees, rescued them and turned them into these magical topiary sculptures. So that's Pearl Fryar in a nutshell.
That's a beautiful analogy. Yeah. And where did you fit into this story? So
so let's go back to
Pearl.
that.
Yeah.
So remember when I heard of this term topiary, I'm working on this sculpture. The neighbor comes up, so I'm looking up topiary, and I'm getting inspired.
So funny. It's like the same as Pearl.
Exactly.
Your story, like somebody.
It is,
it's like the same kind of
because I was already doing it.
Yeah.
I was already doing it, but just at a younger age.
Right.
So I'm visiting home, showing my parents, what I'm working on. My dad's my biggest art critic. I always show him anything I'm working on. Hey, look at this, Dad. Hey, look at this, and it's like, oh, it's all right. I would have did this. You need to work on this more. It's like, God. So this is exactly what happens. I show him. this property art. I said, look, Dad, nobody's doing this. I am the only one in the world doing property art. And he immediately humbles me and says, wow, that looks like a Pearl Fryar. I'm like, no. I created this. You sure? Because that sure does look like a Pearl Fryar. I'm like, who is this woman that you keep talking about? When you think of Pearl, you think of a woman. I got an Aunt May Pearl. I'm thinking of Pearl as a woman. I'm like, is she in England? I've been looking up Topiary lately. I don't think I came across her. He's like, it's a man in South Carolina. Let me show you. And he gets on the computer, Googles him. That was the mind-blowing, life-changing event happened there. And I was obsessed with his style and what he was creating. What he showed was freedom with doing whatever you want. So I saw a documentary, and that just blew my mind even more. Loving his story, and it's like, okay, I'm going to do exactly what Pearl's doing, and I see what he's doing to Bishopville. He's not only just putting topiary everywhere in his property, that's spreading like wildfire throughout the community, not just on that street, but throughout the entire city of Bishopville. So I saw this, and I'm like, I want to do this to my hometown. So I went on a mission to create a lot of topiary. And it's like, what's a lot of topiary? And I said I had a contemplate. I'm like, well, what's a goal? Because I can't like brag and say, I created 50 topiary in Youngstown. It's like, is anybody going to jump at that? 100, and they're like, it's still not enough. But I wanted to create 330 topiary to match our area code. Youngstown area code is 330. Gotcha. I go on the mission to create 330 topiary. 2 years later, that's in 2014, I get the opportunity to make it down to go see Pearl Fryar in person. So now I'm meeting this man I've been idolizing over these several years. And he poured into me. I asked him a million questions. And I'm sure he was like, oh, you're just, regular bystander. But as the conversation continued, I would pull out my phone. I was showing him pictures. It was like, wow. And this is something he said to me that will stay with me for the rest of my life. I wish I had it recorded. But he said, he's looking at my pictures, and he says, wow, you know what? I've never met another person that was doing anything similar to what I was doing. Yeah, he's like, I see topiary all over the world, but I've never seen somebody doing anything close to what I'm doing. What you're doing is very unique. Keep doing it. So then I'm like, I got the stamp of approval.
What you needed right there.
I got the stamp of approval. I probably stayed there for almost 3 hours talking to Pearl. It was later in the evening. Tours are gone. Nobody else was coming in the garden. And I got a chance he's riding his John Deere around, and I'm walking along. I was like, can I just get in? Don't keep making me walk, Pearl. Yeah, we walking laps around the yard. But every chance I would stop at one, and I just picked his brain. It's like, how are you doing this? How did you get the inspiration for this? How do you create this? I'm opening up the tree. I'm just trying to look at the mechanics on the inside, because that really is what tells the story. There's a lot of times you don't see. It's like, how did that happen? Well, he pulled this branch from over on one way and pulled it together with another branch and zip tied them together. And it's like, zip ties. I never would have thought of that. Wow, now I use zip ties all the time, right? He's using pieces of wire, like very small pieces of wire. Just, it could be a branch that's, a branch could be just laying a little bit out. And instead of cutting that, he's going to utilize that foliage that's already there and just pull it in a little bit with a little piece of wire and connect it to the nearby branch for that time. It's just all these different techniques. So from that visit, I go home and everything changed. The whole style started changing. I started deep diving into topiary even more. I wanted to find, is there other Pearl Fryars that I may have never heard of? You know what? There isn't. I've never found another Pearl Fryar even close to what he was doing. And especially, being African American, being a black man, I've never could relate to anybody to what he was doing. And Pearl was the only person I could relate to. So I gravitated more to him and what he was accomplishing. From 2016, first visit with Pearl, return visit every year after that. Made it an annual visit. Came back 2017. Hey, Pearl, look what I'm doing now. Learning more from him. 2018 return. 2019. I proposed to my wife in 2018 at the garden. Fast forward 2020 into COVID, and I happened to see a post on Facebook that showed a picture of the garden being overgrown. And they're like, "Oh, is Pearl dead? What's going on?" I'm like, Pearl's mom's not there. There's no way. I immediately called the house. Wife answers, hey, can I talk to Pearl? It's Mike Gibson, blah, blah, blah. Guy from Youngstown. So yeah. So let me see if he's up from his nap. I said, oh, no, wake up. I just needed confirmation he was still with us. That's all. But that was a spark. I wanted to see how I can help out. Yeah. Me and my wife, we decided to go take a trip down to Pearl's. I make my way down here in March of 21. Yeah. And I'm driving up the street. I got my tools in the truck, and I'm ready to help some way. Like I'll trim at least one tree here. Yeah. Like I traveled all this way. At least let me help some way. And I get there and I hear the sound of hedge trimmers, and I'm thinking, just neighbors are doing their yard, right? And I get up there and there's a guy on the lift and there's people trimming down low. And it's like, what is going on? Somebody beat me to the punch. Oh. Yeah, there was a crew working on the garden. So I get out, walk around, I'm assessing, like, it's all right. I could do better than that. I don't know what they're doing. But it's not looking like how I remember, to be honest. Gotcha. So it's like I got these pictures on my wall. I stare at them every day. I know exactly how certain sculptures should look, right? So I get around, I start talking to the guys, and it's like, hey, who are you? And they're like, who are you? No, they tell me that they're hired by the University of South Carolina and the Atlanta Botanic Garden, and they are in the process of getting a grant. Part of the stipulation was they had to show the initiative that they can handle such a project. And if you got this grant, if you award this grant, who's going to upkeep it? So they said, we'll hire a topiary artist in residence, right? But they haven't found one yet. So these guys are telling me this. I'm like, so you haven't found the topiaries? He's like, I don't know where we'll find them. I only heard of Pearl being a topiary artist. I don't know another topiary artist. We'll probably have to hire some horticulturalist or something. Like, don't do that. No. Yeah. So in talking to them, they told me all this information. I told them who I was. It's like, hey, I'm a topiary artist. They're like, no way. So I give them my card, and they're like, topiary artist? He really is a topiary artist, right? I have a picture on there that shows my work, and they're like, whoa, you did this. So how can I be a part of this? Immediately, sales mode goes on, and now I got to figure out how can I convert them to allowing me to work with them somehow, right, and they're like, well, I'm like, who do I have to contact? Because I would love to be a part of this project. And they give me some information, and it was like, I'll do you one better. I'll call her. So it was the Jane Prisby, who was used to be the executive director at the McKissick Museum. Talks to her. He's like, you'll never believe this. This guy just showed up, say he's a topiary artist, blah, 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 So it was like serendipitous. It all had to happen, right? Yeah. It all had to happen. Tuesday, that woman, Jane, comes out, talk to her more about, what's going on with your project. How can I be involved? Basically it's like an interview. I'm telling her everything I've done, who I am, things I've worked on. I'm describing trees and showing her, what I would do with it, and that was really great. So she takes my name, brings it back to this committee, and they're like, yes, we need this guy. Yeah, so I negotiated a contract, and that's in March. I came back down in May, and for the month of May, I was like, hey, I can do a little bit better than these guys. Let me show you. So I came down in May and showed them, and at the end of May, they found out they got the grant, and they offered me the position as the topiary artist in residence at Pearl Fryar's Topiary Garden. This was a life-changing opportunity, and it has. Since I've been down here, my whole life has changed for my family and I, and it's only been for the best. I've been traveling the country. I do speaking engagements all over the place. I do topiary all over the place. So it's been a phenomenal journey since then. But so we moved down in after Labor Day, September 6th, and I've been here ever since. And continued to work into the garden and help restore that garden. So I had a year and restored the garden to its glory days. I trimmed everything that if you look up Pearl's, Pearl's garden, I trimmed all those trees. I trimmed them all, and several times, right? So they grow so fast. Everything grows so fast. Yeah. But and that's how I ended up in South Carolina. Moved down here and did my residency, and after that, was a grand opportunity to keep moving forward.
Across America, nonprofits just like yours trust Tax 990 to e-file their 990 returns. We make it super easy to fill out your return, allow other members of your organization to approve the return, and even check your return for common errors. Create a free account today at tax990.com.
So how did that clip come about? So where did that come from? Did somebody reach out to you? They were putting together a team, or did you something you apply for?
You know what? That's really great how that happened. I'm posting all these pictures on social media. You know, I created 330 topiaries already at this time. So 6 years it took me.
Yeah.
So in the middle of May of COVID 2020, I created my 330th topiary, right? So, but I was already starting to get some more attention leading up to it. You know, you're at 200 topiaries, you know, people kind of noticing you now. Somebody emailed me this random email, say, "Oh, we've seen your work on Instagram." Immediately, I'm like, spam likely. This is a scam. About to put this in the spam folder and delete this. It's probably, now I got a virus on my computer. Oh, man, why did I open this?
Yep.
You know, but no, I kept reading and they're like, yeah, we want to pick your brain about this new show that we're developing. This was just in the development phases. They were trying to develop a pitch reel to send off to networks and try to get a show. Yeah, and they're like, yeah, we've seen some work. You know, you look like you know what you're doing. You know about topiary. We just want to know, you know, from an expert perspective, tell us more about topiary so we can develop a show about it. So I need to email them back. So I emailed them back, got a phone call set up. And after the call, you know, towards the end, it was like, you know, that was some great information. Now I want to shift gears because I'm thinking maybe you'll be better as a contestant on the show. Would you ever consider being on the show?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I guess I could. I mean, yeah, this sounds pretty interesting. I could be on the TV show. Sure, why not? You know,
so you're kind of a developer of the show, and then they transitioned to being like, well, you're kind of the prime candidate for a contestant here. So you kind of need to
it's very true. I would say once getting on the show, I saw some ideas that I may have been involved in. Early on, I was like, wait a second.
Like, I created this challenge.
I told I told them about that. Yeah, you know, but no, I would say I really did help because I mean, we created like a sizzle reel, you know, where they give me some questions, I answer. I'm showing them like trimming the topiary, what that looks like, talking about it, and that they use that to in their sizzle reel to pitch these networks, and that was like a game changer. At least what they told me. They could be telling me anything, but at least what they said, it was like, yo, your section of it was really what grabbed their attention because they saw somebody really trimming the topiary. It was like from there, you did not know. I did not know I was going to be on the show for sure. You know, I was probably a shoo-in, at least in my mind. I was like, there's no way they could not have me on the show. I've been through all of this, all these interviews, but when they told me, maybe like in the middle of COVID, they were like, "Oh yeah, all right, you're casted onto the show. You're one of the cast members. We just don't know when we're shooting this show. Just be on standby. It could be soon. It could be anytime, as long as we get a window that opened up." Well, window opened up in October of 2020 of like, you know, I guess low numbers. So like September, October opened up, and they were like, "Hey, can you come out in 2 weeks? We got a window. We're going to make this show." So when we think of a topiary show clipped, topiary is living topiary. What I do, living trees. You got faux topiary, which you see like silk, fake topiary you see in hotels and Hobby Lobby and Walmart, right? But then you got what's called mosaic culture, and mosaic culture is what we did on the show. It's because it's a form of topiary and you're clipping it essentially. You know, there's a form of topiary, but mosaic culture is what you see at Disney World. Those characters, Elsa, Mickey Mouse, they're created out of these flowers, right? And you're like, how did they achieve that?
The Rose Parade.
The Rose Parade and Epcot, right? So they're building a wired frame. They're surrounding it with landscape fabric, filling it with soil, and then poking holes into it to put plants in it. And then the plants grow out from there. And then they're constantly, at least in Disney World, they're constantly trimming it. Yeah. But it's a different style. So on the show, the very first challenge, and we don't know what's about to happen. They gave us an idea of like the first 3 challenges, or 4 challenges maybe, of like suggestions of what it could be, and come up with ideas of what you would do if this was the challenge. But even when you got into it was like everything changed. It was like, all right, thanks for those suggestions. This is what we're going to do. And you're like, oh, this is different. Yeah. So the first challenge, we actually clip a tree. Yeah. And that was like, oh yeah. I've been waiting for this.
You're like at home in that element.
Yeah, I'm about to show out. I brought I wear a utility belt of like 6 different shears. Yeah. Right. So I'm the only one that has this utility belt of shears, and everybody's like, "Who is this guy?"
Walking in like a samurai with you.
Yeah. Nobody had the arsenal that I quite had. Right. So I'm prepared. Immediately when they start out, everybody runs over. This is competition, right? Everybody runs over and just immediately like just cutting something. Yeah. I'm the only one that's just standing there, staring at the tree with a sketch pad, sketching out my design, because I'm like, all right, what could this be? Yeah. What's the tree? I'm opening it up. I'm like, they're like, oh, you got 4 hours, so that's plenty of time. Yeah. I can do this in 2. This is So after completing that first one, I win the first challenge. Yeah, I'm gonna give you spoilers. Yeah, the show came out 2 years ago.
People have had their chance to watch it.
Yes, it came
Go
out
check
2
it out
years
now,
ago,
of course. By the
clipped
way,
on. You can either watch it streaming on Discovery Plus. Yeah. I won the first challenge. I'm on cloud 9. Yeah. It's like, oh, bring on the next tree. What's next? Yeah. So the next challenge, there's no more trees. Oh, yeah. So I'm like, where's the trees? I'm here to clip some trees. Right. You told me there would be trees. Yeah, you told me it would be topiary. You're like, mosaic culture is topiary. It's like, now you got to weld something. Welding? Huh? What do you mean? If you don't know welding, you're in quite a bind, because you don't know where the supporting joint should be, where it should be. Things are starting to collapse, and you're like, how do I fix this? But it was so much fun, because one of the judges, you may have heard of this woman before. Her name is Martha Stewart. She may have some popularity there. Snoop's best friend, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, she's amazing. Martha is quite the comedian. Yeah. She is unhinged. Yeah.
Was she involved in it from the beginning, or did they bring her in?
Oh no, she was every episode. Yeah, pretty much every episode
from the inception of the show. Was she involved in the
that? I don't know. Okay, I can't say if she was a part of the development, but I'm sure she had a hand in it, because she's the lead judge. She's making the decision over there. Yeah. It was really, really cool working with Martha. She baked us a cake. Yeah, she made us a cake. Yeah.
Did you get to eat a cake by Martha Stewart?
Martha cut each of us a slice of cake and sat down and ate lunch with us. Yes,
that's pretty cool. Yes, it's not every day you get to sit and talk with a guy who ate a cake by Martha Stewart.
I sat next to her, and I was just, she was like any other person. At that moment, you didn't think of Martha like as Martha Stewart. Right. It was just like, she's just somebody's aunt, right? Yeah. She's just
that's fun.
Yeah, it's like your grandma or something. Like, she's pretty, but a cool hip grandma. Yeah. Right? Martha was pretty fun to talk to, and she actually, so that first topiary, get this, that first challenge where we made that topiary, that tree for the first episode, and Martha loved that so much. She had her crew come pick it up and installed it in her yard. Nice. Yeah. She put it in front of her front door.
Work in Martha Stewart's garden. Wow. Nice. Yeah. What, you have any upcoming projects you want to talk about?
Man,
something you're working on now you're excited about?
Well, tomorrow I head out to New York. Okay. I fly out in the morning to do a workshop. So one of the big things I do now is I do workshops on topiary therapy. So I teach people how to do topiary, but in the same way I'm teaching them how to stay focused and be calm and be present. When COVID happened, I realized that we all have a connection with somebody that was affected by COVID. I probably got COVID like 4 or 5 times. Right. That was the birth of the workshops, when I realized that we all were dealing with some type of grief and stress from that error. I wanted to develop something that could help, and I realized that what I was doing was giving me relief and helping me stay stress-free, teaching me patience, teaching me to be calm. And I wanted to teach that to people, so I started offering these topiary therapy workshops, big projects. Other than that, I'll be working on South Carolina State Museum. I managed the grounds for that.
Oh, great.
So I've been doing that for about a couple of years now. So I managed the Pearl Fryar Topiaries there. And then there's projects all over the place. I've managed a park in Columbia called Earlwood Park. It's up North Main Street for anybody that's in Columbia. There's a lot of topiary around. There's probably, 50 topiaries I've created there.
Nice.
Making them, I'm turning it into a topiary garden. So there will be continual planting and topiaries created as years progress. I'm hoping. At least that's what we've been talking about.
Yeah. All right. And if folks want to find more about what you do, website and social media?
It's so easy. It's so easy to find me.
Yep.
Gibson, Gibson, Topiary. I know people are going to struggle with spelling this. Topiary.
Yeah.
.com. GibsonTopiary.com will lead you down a rabbit hole of great pictures and articles and you'll see a lot of great stuff that I've created, and you can find all my social media from there.
We'll link it all in the
description. You'll find all that. You'll find all that. But GibsonTopiary.com will lead you the right way. You'll find anything you need to know.
Well, hey, it's been a pleasure talking with you. We could keep going for longer, but we'll respect your time here, and we appreciate you coming up to join the Bandit Room with us.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me. This has been a really great time, and hopefully this inspires someone to want to be great at their gifts.
Amen. All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, that concludes this episode of the Bandit Room. Stick around next week and see what we talk about.
The Bandit Room is a production of Span Enterprises, located in sunny Rock Hill, South Carolina. We've been developing, supporting, and growing successful IRS e-filing and business management solutions since 2010. Go to SpanEnterprises.com now to learn more. The views and opinions expressed in the Bandit Room are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect or state the opinions of Span Enterprises. No information should be considered as tax, legal, or other professional advice.